So Riot is infamous for forcing controversial decisions onto the players, gaslighting them about how it's a good thing, blaming any issues that arise on the players being the problem, being immune to taking any accountability for their mistakes, having the most poorly crafted, unoptimized software in the industry, being incredibly incompetent with data security, abandoning projects on a whim, and being absolute control freaks who crave godly power in their ecosystem. And all of this has been readily apparent with the rollout of Vanguard into League of Legends. And Vanguard is Riot's proprietary anti-cheat that they instituted for Valorant. And after 4 years, they finally brought it over to League. And they primarily cited an increase in scripters and botters, that their previous technology to combat this has stopped working and is now prehistoric. There's also the idea that kernel-level anti-cheats are just becoming industry standard, and Riot is just doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, so it should be perfectly fine. After all, you probably have Fortnite installed, and Fortnite has a kernel-level anti-cheat, Vanguard is a kernel-level anti-cheat, so there's no difference. And that's one of the big themes that you'll see throughout this, is that there is a gross mischaracterization of how these things actually work, and a lot of it is sort of meant to quell the fears that anybody has about Vanguard and the reality of what it is doing to people's systems. It is bricking people's computers. People are having constant blue screen of death issues. People are having to wipe their drives, reformat them, reinstall Windows, and Vanguard still doesn't actually work against these cheats. Riot is promising the world to people, and they're heavily downplaying any possible issue that is actually occurring from this. So first off, go over this, which is Riot's dev blog about the integration of Vanguard into League. First off, this entire thing reads from some Rick and Morty, Pickle Rick, I heckin' love science, San Francisco Redditor as the person who wrote this. It is incredibly sarcastic in the way that it's talked about. And there's so much of downplaying any possible issue that anybody could have with this. If you think that this isn't the most perfect, blissful piece of software ever, you're kind of silly, and you deserve bad things to happen to you. For example, just this talk right here about feel free to skim through it, but this material is now known to the state of California to cause bone lengthening and will not be on the semester's midterm. There's so much of this Rick and Morty style humor in this. And with this being such a controversial thing, a lot of this sort of humor that's caked into it definitely has a part in trying to quell the fears that people have of Vanguard. Now, this graph compares both scripters who are cheating in games and bot accounts, which are primarily going to be in intro-level AI games, and nobody is going to be directly interacting with these. And this is the first graph in this post, and that is already directly conflating the two. Most people are not going to read the entire thing, and this is going to be the big thing that they see. Now, it's important to understand Riot's historical relationship with data, and that any time that independent people have been able to have access to the data, Riot is very consistent about manipulating their data in a way that benefits whatever narrative that they want to push at the time, and that they have a really loosey-goosey relationship with the truth. An example would be when Riot tried to justify the idea that their Mythic system was a success in increasing item diversity. They used data from Earth games, and this was only able to be found because that data was public. And you would find things like Kraken Slayer Braum, which would never be something that is played in ranked, and they use this to justify the success of their systems. In a very similar case, in the LCS viewership, they talk about how there is a 4% increase in viewership, but don't talk about how it was LEC raids, it was co-streaming from European viewers and Brazilian viewers, and how so much of that plays into a small little increase when the majority of that is coming from viewers who never would have been watching the LCS in the first place. And so in reality, NA viewership for the NA region is down. One of the big misconceptions that Riot is really heavily playing into is the idea that the data breach that happened late last year was the cause for the increase in scripting, and is implied that that data breach is the reason why Vanguard needs to be instituted in League. But according to Riot's own graphs, the prime time of scripting happened well before the data breach. There's basically no correlation between that data breach and an increase in scripting. A lot of this stuff happened later. I've spoken with a lot of people in the scripting community, and everything points to the idea that Riot just stopped trying to maintain these systems. And there's this concept called problem reaction solution, where if you want to institute a particular mandate, you create a problem, then you bolster a reaction or fear to this to give a demand for a solution, which you then provide. So in a situation where Riot wants to institute Vanguard, they have a direct incentive to stop any other work to combat scripters and cheaters, so that there's more of a demand from the player base for Riot to swoop in and save the day with their 24/7 kernel-level anti-cheat that can stop any other driver at a whim. And despite Vanguard being more intrusive than any other anti-cheat, the player base will accept it more because there's more of an issue for them to combat. And as somebody who played many years in these Grandmasters Challenger games, I have noticed a significant spike in the amount of cheaters around 2021 to 2022. And this wouldn't be the first time that Riot has stopped work on a system in order to make Vanguard look better than it is. Valorant was a game that was designed from the ground up to be a competitive game, and 4 years after launch, there is still not a replay system. Replays are incredibly important from a competitive viewpoint, but also replays are the only way that you can reliably see whether or not somebody is cheating against you. And so the fact that Valorant does not have replays gives the Valorant player base the illusion that there are less cheaters than there actually are, because you can't actually go back and verify it. The only way that you really catch cheaters in Valorant is if somebody posts a clip and then you see the way that their guns are moving in an unnatural way. And the way that Riot has handled Valorant replays for the past 4 years is that they'll say, oh, hey, replays are coming at the end of the year of silence. Oh, hey, replays are right around the corner, we'll promise we'll get to it, year of silence. Oh, hey, you know, we've actually stopped developing a replay system and there is no plan for it in the future. Actually, we do want a replay system when we're working on it. And then the most recent update is, you know, we just lost the technology for a replay system, and we can't go back to a world in which a tier 1 esport has replays. And you might be thinking there's too much of a degree of speculation in this line of thinking. Never attribute to malice what can equally be attributed to stupidity. Maybe Riot isn't just malicious, but they're actually incompetent. Never mind the fact that that phrase originated from a joke book and wasn't meant to be taken as received wisdom. All that phrase does is allow malicious actors to hide their intent behind the idea of being stupid. And when an entity like Riot has a long storied history of being malicious to various actors, it's only natural to take that line of reasoning with their behaviors. An obvious example of their malicious behavior is not only their gender discrimination and workplace abuse that required them to pay a $100 million settlement, but the fact that they tried to get out of paying that $100 million settlement until they were forced to, and not a single executive who was responsible for overseeing this workplace culture got fired. Nobody took responsibility for what happened, which is something that Riot is notorious for doing. And there's a phrase in this dev article that is a complete fabrication which reveals the entire game from Riot, from them making this one specific claim. This phrase, even Challenger, which we manually audit on a regular cadence. They said they were manually scouring the ladder and made sure to get people banned. Despite this, there were Zeri scripters who would be at the top of Challenger and did not catch a permaban for a year and a half. There were times where the rank 1 and rank 2 people on the leaderboard were blatant scripters who weren't even trying to hide it. There were people who are in Grandmasters Plus who did not catch a permaban for 3 years. Now, before going in depth into how well Vanguard works, let's look into how well Vanguard doesn't work and how it's destroying people's machines and the amount of issues that people are experiencing. Now, right here is one of the most obvious examples that is a repeating theme within this rollout. Somebody is reporting a type of issue. Many other people are reporting the exact same type of issue. When they never had this issue before the Vanguard patch hits, all of a sudden everybody's getting the exact same issue, and Riot is completely denying that this is an issue for anybody. So this guy right here is saying that their laptop won't even boot after the Vanguard patch, and it's not even drawing any power from the outlet. And this is something that I've seen but many cases of people reporting. And the writer is denying that Vanguard has anything to do with this, that it must be something to do with, you know, the hardware having issues. Somebody else replies, multiple people getting the exact same situation after patching it with Vanguard must be the user's fault. Everybody's computers decided to randomly stop working right as Vanguard hit. And Riot, once again, just denying that this exists. Hey, this is not at all related to us, which you'll see a lot of. One of the first servers to get the Vanguard rollout was Korea, and noted League personality LS had 2 computers that were bricked by Vanguard, and he had to open up his computer and remove the CMOS battery to actually get things up and running. And this is one of the only issues that Riot ever actually acknowledged, which they had to because of the fact that LS is so popular and this issue was so widely talked about. There was no way for them to ignore this issue. With this being pretty much the only thing that they ever actually admitted was an issue, the way that they responded to this was by saying that there were no instances of Vanguard bricking anyone's computer. Now, first off, the term brick does not mean that something is rendered unusable perpetually and that there is no way of fixing it. Bricked as a term just means something is rendered unusable, but that does not mean that it is unfixable. This right here is a brick. This brick has silicone in it. Silicone is what computer chips are made out of. If I refined this brick enough and did some voodoo rituals to get this working, I could get this to technically become a computer chip. So just because something can be fixed does not mean that it is not bricked. So Riot's talking about how there's a specific setting in Windows 11 that some people bypassed that was the cause of the computers not working anymore. And so Riot is effectively shouldering the blame onto the users for doing particular things with their computer, and that it is not actually Vanguard's fault for the bricking. And there are a couple settings right here, UEFI and TPM 2.0, that needed to both be enabled or the BIOS wouldn't boot. And Riot is blaming this on the users for putting themselves into a situation where they're on a particular operating system and they did not have these things installed. The problem is that Vanguard is perfectly capable of seeing that these things are disabled and that it is not a compatible system, and that it still installed itself and it still started running. So Vanguard took no care in actually determining whether or not things were capable. And remember that this is a software that they delayed for 2 months, and there are still issues with basic compatibility checks. And you wouldn't know any of this because any post on the forum Reddit is getting deleted about Vanguard, and any post in the bug megathread that isn't just, oh, Vanguard is making my client not work. If it's anything past that, it's getting deleted. And so you would never know that anybody is having issues with Vanguard that are causing people's computers to become unusable. And if you're somebody who's not a technical wizard, a lot of this does seem like wizardry. And depending on certain systems that you have, opening up your computer and removing your battery might void your warranty. And this goes into the update that Riot posted. They talked about how the rollout has gone well and we're seeing Vanguard functioning as intended. And right here, they say that fewer than 0.03% of players have reported issues with Vanguard. So everything should be good, right? The problem is that whenever you look at the statistical sorcery that Riot likes to often pull, you can look at this as a great example of seeing that they are not specific with their data, so you must assume that they are presenting it in the way that is most beneficial towards them. When they say players, you have no way of knowing if they're saying if it's players who have Vanguard installed, players who have League installed but don't have the new patch, or players that even have a League of Legends account. There's no way of knowing what they actually mean by players. And this is also only for people who have reported issues with Vanguard to Riot customer support. And for a time between the launch of Vanguard and the release of that update, there is a time in which the Riot support site didn't even work. And a big thing is, Riot support is notorious for just not being helpful at all. Most people who have tech issues will go to many different lengths before they go to Riot support. They could either contact a friend who is more tech savvy, they could troubleshoot the issue on their own through various forums, or they could just give up and not deal with all of this grief to play their monthly ARAM game. And on the same line of there not being a compatibility check, when Vanguard did get onto the PBE, it installed itself without permission. It installed a kernel level driver without actually asking you if it was okay to do that. And by installing this on your system, you're giving Riot ultimate control over your computer, significantly more than any other anti-cheat demands. And they can't even get the basics right. Let's go into other issues that people have been reporting. A lot of people having blue screens. Constant blue screens of death. Had to delete Vanguard just to load into Windows. Blue screen of death. Now, there are also other interesting issues like this. So one thing that Vanguard does differently than any other anti-cheat is that if it sees a driver that it has conflict with, it will just stop the driver. Every other anti-cheat will just stop you from loading into game, whereas Vanguard, if it sees something that it thinks, hey, this is a little bit suspect, it'll just shut that down. It's a very commonly reported thing that people's audio drivers are getting shut down so that you can't hear anything when you're playing the game because Vanguard is stopping you from being able to hear things. People who are just very technically knowledgeable, spending an hour troubleshooting issues from community-based resources, and that these sources are not Riot-based. Riot is basically asking you, hey, submit a ticket. They don't have a big knowledge base for troubleshooting tech issues for Vanguard on any kind of website that is something that's more useful than just Googling this person right here. Just had my PC start to crash every 30 seconds in the middle of installing Vanguard, even when I was in safe mode and just sitting in BIOS. People having blue screen of death, formatted it, installed on Windows 11 and 10. Now, one of the things is that Riot is claiming that pretty much the only issues happen is if you go onto Windows 11 and you don't have compatible hardware and you try to fake having the compatible hardware. But a lot of these issues that people are having, like blue screens of death, like their computers not getting power, a lot of these issues are happening on Windows 10, which, according to things that Riot have said, should not be possible. Here's another example of the audio drivers not working on somebody's computer and just getting completely blocked. And this is a common scene that you'll see on many computers that you'll see even streamers have, where they have the default Windows wallpaper, only the basic apps installed, because many people had to completely reformat their hard drives, re-download Windows, get everything just started straight from scratch because Vanguard wasn't working. And if you're somebody who's a streamer who's doing this for a living, you need to be able to get all of this stuff working right away. So you don't have the time to wait 4 days to get an automated response from Riot support. And even if you don't play League for a living, there are many issues with Vanguard that can stop you from being able to make a living, and you can't afford to wait for Riot support. While also, people are reporting issues in completely unrelated games, like Vanguard causing connectivity issues with Minecraft servers. The anti-cheat for League of Legends is causing issues for people wanting to play Minecraft. And this is a really common thing, that people are getting issues with the Vanguard installation into League of Legends that were never a thing with the Vanguard that was there for Valorant. So many people are getting issues, even when they had Vanguard installed for years, that only started after the Vanguard patch for League. And this is to say that there's probably a lot of things that have changed to try to piggyback onto the Riot client that is causing a lot of these conflicts. One of the smaller things that people are reporting is many people are reporting issues with the game feeling choppy or sluggish or having a low FPS or feeling of low FPS, even if it's not actually showing. There are just so many people reporting that their performance in their League games is a lot worse. This person having crazy frame rate issues played a League game with very good specs, 30 FPS, going down to 28 FPS. And this is not only a common issue that people are reporting with their League games, but this is also something that people are reporting in games unrelated to League. So this player is showing that he has Vanguard installed and is showing that when he is playing this other game, he is experiencing these constant freeze frames, lag, performance issues that make the game just nigh unplayable. However, when he turns off Vanguard, turns off Riot Vanguard, all of a sudden you'll see here that as it's gone, as Vanguard disappears, so do the performance issues. And now all of a sudden the game is running buttery smooth. And here's another example of people having to be very diligent with their computers to run this, which is so much further than what any other software requires you to do. Other examples of people having their OSs failing to boot, just having massive issues. Riot support not helping at all. Laptops just not starting. More people having their computers being bricked. And if you look into more of the information of what these people are posting, a lot of them aren't on the Windows 11 and don't have the specific issue that LS had, which is the only issue that Riot is actually confirming was an issue. Constantly getting more blue screens, forced to reinstall Windows, and now the PC is operating worse before. PC freezes, blue screens, formatted it, re-downloaded everything on a clean install, still having issues. And this is also another big issue that people are having, is that when people have Vanguard installed, some people's Ethernet drivers and Wi-Fi drivers and just general internet just stops working for the entire computer. And so it's not just that people are getting lag in League, people are having their entire internet starting to have issues. People have Vanguard installed, doing everything right, and then all of a sudden, you don't have Vanguard. You need Vanguard to play. Despite it being on the entire time, you get kicked out of the game, and then you have to restart your computer to get back into the game. And when you're streaming, that's a pretty big issue. Another example here of people having issues of failing to connect to the internet. More blue screens of death, even more blue screens of death. Now here's a clip of Cadril on his second day of having this issue, to where he starts up his PC, starts up stream, nothing else is done, and then Vanguard is not enabled. And this is something that is just very common as an issue, and that you need to specifically restart your computer as opposed to just turning it on. That's something that a lot of people are experiencing, and a lot of people will shut off their computer and then turn their computer on. And that's how people normally operate computers. But Vanguard does not like that. Vanguard wants you to specifically, when you have your computer turned off, turn on your computer, then restart your computer, and then all of a sudden you're okay. This is a general thing that you don't do in tech. This is something that is very easy for people who are not tech savvy to make very significant mistakes and ruin their computer. So if you have something that is requiring people to edit the registry, you're causing a lot of potential issues that could ruin people's computers, because people also are not backing up their registry. Another example right here of somebody being on Windows 10. Computer bricks. Vanguard is the only thing that is a common trend. Hardware is up to date, so is the software. Doesn't know what it is. And this is one of the silliest things right here. There are so many different drivers that Vanguard is blocking, like people's fan curves. So if you have different software to ensure that your computer doesn't die from heat, Vanguard will just block those. Various different drivers, including the internet drivers, getting blocked by Vanguard. Citrix, which is a application that a lot of people need to work from home, has issues and conflicts with Vanguard. So to play League, you at times have to decide between putting food on the table or playing League. And Riot wants you to make one choice over the other. And this goes into reiterating, why does Vanguard have all of these issues but no other anti-cheat does? It's because Vanguard functionally does not operate like any other anti-cheat and is infinitely more intrusive in terms of what it does. Now, most kernel level anti-cheats start when you start the game and stop when you stop the game. So it'll only be active then. Vanguard starts before or during the boot process. And not only does it start before anything else starts, Vanguard also takes the liberty of disabling the drivers that it feels has some type of vulnerability or conflict. And no other anti-cheat does that. If another anti-cheat detects something that might be a script, it just won't let you get into a game. Whereas Riot feels like it deserves the power to just stop any driver that potentially has conflicts, which is why people are getting so many technical issues that no other anti-cheat has. And it's those two things combined that Riot's Vanguard does that no other anti-cheat does, which is causing all of these issues and all of these conflicts. And one thing that people may say is the idea of, oh, Vanguard has been in Valorant for 4 years and people didn't have all of these issues. First off, a lot of these issues were present. People's computers were getting melted because their GPU drivers and fan drivers just stopped working, and Vanguard didn't even tell people about that. At least Vanguard now has the decency of telling people when it's stopping something. And the thing about Valorant is that it was a new game that has never not had Vanguard. So if somebody is uncomfortable with Vanguard, or if somebody has technical issues with Vanguard, they can just go over to any of the other shooter games that they might want to play. Whereas League already has an install base that is dedicated to this game and only wants to play League. And if they run into issues with Vanguard, they're going to take more steps to try to resolve those issues before they just say, all right, I'm done with League. Because League of Legends is just a very addicting game, and people are not gamers, they are League of Legends players when you play this game. And one thing that I never saw an answer for anywhere was the idea of, why does Vanguard stop drivers instead of just stopping you from being able to get into a game. And there's this one post on the Riot Games subreddit where somebody is basically just asking this specific question about why does Vanguard stop programs instead of just stopping the game from being able to be played. And this Rioter does not answer the question. He just says Vanguard notifies you when it blocks something. And I say, hey, you're not answering the question. Answer the question. And he replies to me responding to one of the other topics that I had brought up, not addressing the main point of the thread. And then still once again does not respond to it. And then finally, after being pushed on trying to answer this question 3 times, finally gets an answer. And this is the writer who wrote the original Vanguard X League article. And his answer for why Vanguard blocks drivers is that it doesn't want any driver running in parallel with Vanguard. So basically, if Vanguard sees a driver that might cause an issue, it doesn't want the other driver running in parallel with it. So instead, it'll just block it. They're reframing what I'm saying as my request is that Vanguard should unload instead of block to prevent this parallel running. And they're saying that it's just not really a high priority for them to work on, which is a very convenient thing that Riot does say a lot when they have no plans of doing something, is just, yeah, this isn't high priority, which is to say that Riot does not think it is a priority for Vanguard to not have the highest privileges that essentially is the god of your system that acts like an antivirus and will stop any program that it thinks might be a little bit suspect. And that goes into the general point that Riot wants to uphold the integrity of League of Legends and Vanguard over the cost of your entire system. It would rather make your computer unusable than make it to where you have barriers between playing League. If you have a fan driver, if you have a work from home app, if you have any of these critical pieces like internet, Riot would rather you have no internet than try to play League and not be able to. And this also goes into the complete censorship of the topic. Despite so many people reporting all of these issues, you would never hear anything about this if you just kind of casually scroll Reddit, scroll various forums that people use, because these things are being completely deleted. This is the one thread that was actually allowed to exist, which was the bug mega thread. And more than half of the comments are being deleted of people experiencing issues. And now it's easy to see all these issues and think that, oh, hey, maybe this is just a vocal minority and the majority of people aren't having issues with this. After all, Riot said everything is going smoothly and only 0.03% of people are reporting issues. As we've gone over before, reporting and experiencing issues are 2 completely unrelated things. The majority of people do not report things, especially when they know that Riot support is just not a useful avenue to go down to fix your issues. And one thing that Riot kind of does to muddy the waters is this idea saying that all of these issues that people are reporting could just be cheaters, could just be scripters and botters who want to put out fake information to make Vanguard look bad. And so this is the one of the heads of the Anticheat putting up posts from various forums that are basically just saying, hey, let's talk about fake issues on these forums and make people think that Vanguard is really, really scary, when actually Vanguard has no issues. Yes, there are going to be scripting communities and scripters who are going to be putting out fake information that is negative towards Vanguard. But on what basis is there to assume that there isn't the opposite? Riot has an even greater monetary incentive to be putting out a lot of information that is pro-Vanguard. And this is just something that is just a fact about any type of controversial issue, any political issue, any issue with a corporation. There's always going to be bots and paid shills on both sides of any particular issue. Like most discussions on the internet are bots talking to bots, and it's just trying to influence you as the real person to think that this side is silly and this side isn't. And also, it's GamerDoc, not to be confused with GamerDoc, the head of performance at Evil Geniuses, who was noted for allegedly abusing an autistic child into malnourishment. This GamerDoc was originally known for running a snitch Discord for cheaters. A lot of the things that this guy says are just completely unfounded. He just says a lot of things that are just kind of wrong. And with this guy running a snitch Discord, there's a very common thing that is done, is very possible to be present here as well. These posts could just be forged by GamerDoc to make you think that every single negative post is from a cheater. And this is a way of sort of muddying the waters in this concept. And so any type of feedback that anybody is giving on Vanguard, even people who want Vanguard to work, it's all being said as, oh, hey, it's just misinformation, or everybody is a cheater. LS is a cheater. If anybody talks negative about Vanguard, they're just farming interactions and farming impressions. Or it's just large-scale bot attacks by people who bot our script. They put all of these other possible options so that anybody who is kind of undecided might look at these things and say, oh, hey, Vanguard isn't really an issue, because obviously I would see something, and a lot of these negative posts could just be from cheaters. And this will go into something of just GamerDoc just saying things just to say things, kind of implying the idea that, oh, hey, they've gotten rid of DMA cheats in this tweet and many others. And DMA cheats are basically just having two computers to make it to where one computer is running the cheats and one computer isn't, and you connect the two in a way that a kernel level anti-cheat wouldn't be able to detect. They're kind of implying this idea that they've solved it, they've cracked the case. Both Vanguard and Faceit have kind of done that, of implying that they've gotten rid of them. However, allegedly, there are people who are right under the level of VCT, which is like the tier 1 league equivalent in Valorant, who are cheating. And people who are also in the ERLs in League who are cheating and have been completely undetected. Most people who have gotten their cheats detected are people who are just not following instructions. Now imagine cheats are a hamburger, right? And the juicy meat on the inside is the scripts. And that's what people really want. And Riot is a bread making company, and they want buns on their place. They don't like burgers. The scripting developers will say, hey, you put the bottom bun there, and then you put the sauce, and then you put the meat, and then you put the toppings. They'll give you a very specific order on how not to get banned. And then some people will they'll pour the sauce right on the table. They'll put the meat down on it, and then all of a sudden, Riot's table can then detect the meat juice, detect the sauce, and then boom, get hit for being a scripter. Whereas if you just follow the very basic instructions for a lot of these things, you're just not going to get banned. And this goes into Riot relying on manual bans so much more, and making it to where people just have a completely warped perspective of what Vanguard does. Now, there's a couple things that Riot has gone over which massively skews the perception of how people think that cheaters are operating, in that this screen that people will see in both Valorant and now League of, oh, hey, if the game detects a cheater, the game will be automatically shut down. You know, you'll get your LP back. Which is like, yeah, I want my LP back. I don't want to have to play with a cheater. And so this, especially in Valorant, has given people a layer of safety to where if people don't see this screen, they assume that there is no cheater in the lobby. When even according to Riot's best case scenario, the idea is to not ban people right away as soon as you detect their stuff, and then you ban in a wave so that it's harder for cheat developers to iterate on their anti-cheat. So it's very possible that Riot can recognize a cheat and then you don't get this screen. There is closet cheating. In League of Legends, there are so many aspects of the game that are leaked that are not supposed to be visible. For example, when anybody does a jungle camp, or when half the abilities in the game are done in Fog of War, your client can read that information, even though it's not visibly present. If you're somebody who's, you know, a Grandmasters player, and then you get these information hacks, you don't have to have any evade scripts or any scripts that turn you into a space gliding Twitch to gain massive advantages. All you need is the information, and that is something that you can do very incognito without triggering anybody's spider senses about whether or not somebody is actually scripting. Because the scripts that are most easy for a high elo player to detect are evade scripts. If you throw out a skill shot, the person is going to instantly dodge it at the perfect angle. And then if you try to go multiple skill shots, they're going to do movements that just seem inhuman. If you want to avoid manual detection, you just turn off the more blatant scripts and then just use things like information scripts or just orb walking scripts to evade detection. And now someone might think this is just a small minority, or this is just scripters, or just this is just that. Nobody is quitting the game because of Vanguard. I'll see you next week, buddy. Oh, this is just going to be an issue that is brushed away in a month and everybody's going to forget about it, just like this other random thing that happened. And League is just not going to be affected negatively by the impact of Vanguard. One thing about the player count is that Riot does not release official player count numbers of how many people are playing their games. However, ranked data of how many games are played is public information. And there's a little funny thing that you can do where you can look at champions who have fairly consistent pick rates, and you can compare the games that were played the week before Vanguard was enabled and the week after Vanguard was enabled. And there are 12 to 15% less ranked games being played week over week. And this is also during the end of the split, which is generally one of the most busy times for people playing ranked to get their goals last second. And so this is something that Riot's not going to talk about, but it is very clear that many, many people are either having technical issues and don't want to play League, are waiting until all of these issues are figured out, or they're just quitting League. This is Riot's worst nightmare with Vanguard, is so many people leaving, which is why they're never going to talk about it, and why they've put such a big campaign into making it to where none of these issues could possibly be related to Vanguard, because people have had worries about Vanguard and people are leaving because of their issues with Vanguard. A similar thing happened in professional wrestling at one point, where the WWE had, 6 million viewers, and, everybody's complaining about, I don't like John Cena, this stuff sucks, give me better stories. And then the response to that from the people in charge was, hey, I'll see you next week, buddy. You don't like what's going on, I'll see you next week. And then a couple years later, they have 2 million viewers, down from 6 million. Oh, you're a League player, you've always been a League player, you always will be a League player. There's nothing that can stop you from playing League. You're addicted. You're going to be here next week. But the truth is, many people have a lot of issues with League, but they don't have a large enough jump to justify leaving. And so it takes big events like Vanguard for people to get the kind of the straw that broke the camel's back to actually take that final leap and stop playing the game that they've been playing 6 games a day for 10 years. And you're also never going to hear any of this from anybody who does League content creation, because fundamentally the business model of a League content creator is that they want you to continue playing the game and they want you to continue being interested in League and League content, because if you're not, then you're no longer going to be interested in their content as much. So while there are a bunch of creators who are voicing their displeasure about this, there's not going to be anybody who is going to say, hey, don't install Vanguard. This stuff is dangerous to your system and does not work and has many, many different issues. And this goes into a big concern that a lot of people also have, which is I'm not feeling comfortable giving Riot all of my data and 24/7 access to my PC. And, there's questions about, oh, Riot's owned by China. I don't want to give them complete access to my computer 24/7. And Riot's kind of response to this is twofold. One is that in the video, they were talking about this idea of they don't take any more data, than they already do. And if you look in their privacy notice, the idea that they don't take any more data than they already do, they already take all of the data. So it's not necessarily going to be that much different. But this also goes into another point in that there's no way to actually verify the data that is taken. And you can say the concept that they talk about of, oh, they agree with every privacy data protection law is a big problem with this, in that Riot is actually legally required to lie about what they do with your data and what the capabilities of Vanguard actually are. So it's kind of the national intelligence law of the People's Republic of China. Riot is 100% owned by Tencent, and Tencent is functionally owned by the Chinese government. And this law essentially forces Riot to give over any data that the Chinese government asks for at any time, and they have to lie about it. They have to say, we're not taking any of your data, even if they're getting all of the data from all of the computers. So when Riot says that they don't give any data to China and that they've never shared data with China before, they are legally required to lie about that. Also, another fun fact is that the Chinese servers have their own anti-cheat, and it's also not kernel level. And Riot, in the original post, said that the Chinese anti-cheat team is more effective than theirs. So the Chinese anti-cheat team is more effective than the NA Riot, despite not having kernel level access. Oh, hey, you can say there's all of these issues with Vanguard. There's still so many issues with scripters or botters, so you have to do something, right? There's no other option but to have Vanguard, is what somebody would say. But there are other options. So Counter-Strike and the Valve developers have understood that they do have a issue with cheating that is especially common in higher level games. There's been this idea that's propagated of them doing nothing at all. But recently they've been doing a lot, and there have been bans that are not only not VAC, they're not Overwatch, they are something else entirely. Valve is taking a multi-pronged approach that does not have a kernel level anti-cheat to get rid of cheaters. They both have VAC, they have some other system that has not been defined yet, and they also have a system called Overwatch that they're going to be implementing that was implemented in Counter-Strike Go. If you're a high-ranked player, you can VOD review games of suspected cheaters and determine whether or not somebody is a cheater. So that plus server-side anti-cheat plus whatever else they're cooking up, there are many other options that you have to get rid of cheaters that are not a kernel-level anti-cheat, which is very easily bypassable, which we'll get into later. And kernel-level anti-cheats are functionally already dead as a concept. Many people in the scripting community talk about how right now, today, is the golden age of cheating in Valorant. There are more people cheating now in Valorant than ever before. And so with Riot putting so much emphasis in trying to have this kernel level anti-cheat, that's less effort that's focused on other methods that are more evergreen and cannot be bypassed as easily. Manual reviews will always be the king. Manual reviews and server-side detection are the methods of anti-cheat that are going to always be the hardest to break and the most reliable at actually catching cheaters. And while Valorant is experiencing its golden age of cheating, in the first week, there were already multiple bypasses to Vanguard for League of Legends. Right here, you see this person using scripts in Arena, which is a game mode that only spawned during the Vanguard patch. And these scripts are not getting detected and not getting banned. And now there's two kinds of bypasses that are currently happening right now. You can just entirely launch League without Vanguard being active, and then you can run 10-year-old scripts through that mechanism. There is the other bypass method, which is just running the script and then running League. And these cheats are able to get past Vanguard without being detected. Now, the thing about Vanguard is the two fat security guards from the Truman Show, right? The two bypasses either work as going past the guards with your weapons in hand while the guards are focused on the show and they're not even actually doing any security work whatsoever, or it's walking up to the guards as they're on their patrol and you're just walking up and just saying, hey, there's nothing to see here, while you're just carrying a giant bazooka. And then you walk by, the guard doesn't even notice you and says, hey, what's that? Oh, must have been the wind. Like, that's the level that Vanguard is working on right now. And both botting and scripting are working perfectly fine right now and have been since about 2 days after Vanguard was released. And even when Vanguard starts losing its usefulness, which it already has, even if you get into the ideal situation where, they're doing 3-month ban waves, what would that even do to stop the scripting community? There's a ban wave. There will be a new bypass that comes in a couple days, and then it will take a couple days for a 80-cent cracked account to get back into high elo, get back into Grandmasters, get back into Challenger. Then it's 2 months of that account being able to play in high elo. This is just functionally not a great way of dealing with cheaters, but it is a very convenient excuse for Riot to institute a 24/7 kernel level anti-cheat that acts like an antivirus and has essentially complete total domain over your computer and take power that no other anti-cheat does. Now, doing my poking around in the scripting community, I kind of had the idea that a lot of the cheating devs would just pull exit scams and give this idea of, oh, hey, our cheats actually do work, pay us money, and then leave when everything gets banned. But Vanguard was so easy to bypass in multiple different ways It seems like even the current cheat devs, even with the current ways of cheating, will still be here for this foreseeable future. And the hypothetical ideal would be for Riot to make it to where the cheats to where you require a very large monetary investment where you need 2 computers to do it, that would be the ideal, but that's not even how it works in Valorant. There are cheats where you can have a single computer and hardware bans don't work, and they require minimal investment from the person who wants to cheat. So all of this effort that is being spent towards this idea of needing a kernel level hardware software on the client's computer, all of this effort could have been spent somewhere just way more fruitful. And in the coming times, as Valve and Counter-Strike start to make their anti-cheat more robust and start to deal with cheaters very competently in ways that don't require kernel level anti-cheat, the more and more they get their stuff together, which I guarantee you they will, and they are, the more and more that Vanguard's anti-cheat is going to be looking sillier and sillier. Because we're going to get to the point to where if Valve can do just as good of a job without kernel level anti-cheat, then what is the basis for having a kernel level anti-cheat that can stop your internet from working, that can blue screen your computer, that can stop any power from being generated to your computer, can stop your fan curves from going to your computer? As Valve starts to make their anti-cheat work in non-intrusive ways, it's going to make Riot look even worse. Understand that Riot is the company that tried to release Clash in 2018, and every single time it would just break. And despite there being no feature improvements or no iterative work put into it, they're still hosting Clash tournaments to this day when the majority of the time it doesn't even work. And you coordinating with 5 of your friends to spend a night together, all of your plans just go down the drain. Riot is the company that will complain about tech debt being the reason why their client is so horrible in 2024, yet they've already reworked the client in the modern age and it still has all of these issues. There's no reason to tell Riot to please rework the client when they already have, and they've shown that they've made no iterative improvements to attempt to fix these issues. They had a client update team that they promised would give regular updates on their status and progress with fixing the client, and then they just stopped doing any of those posts. They have a long history of abandoning projects and then just leaving them to rot. The rollout of Vanguard has been just like every other project that Riot has done, and there's no reason to believe that this is going to be anything different. Everything with Riot rhymes, and if they say that anything is going to be better now, I don't buy it this time. This video is a companion piece to an episode of The Four Horsemen where I joined Richard Lewis, Monte Cristo, and Thorin on the Last Free Nation YouTube channel, where we take a deep dive into this rollout of Vanguard into League of Legends, as well as a dive into Riot's history and why you shouldn't trust them to have this level of access to your computer. You can check out that video down below in the description.